Chapter 27. "If I didn't know better, I'd think I had a new son," said her father. Anne showed off her newly acquired talent of walking, sitting, and moving like a boy. It made everyone laugh, and the levity helped her forget for the moment that this was their last Sunday together. Arabella took Anne's cap off and examined Mr. Bigelow's handiwork. "A new son with the crookedest haircut I've ever seen," she said. "Oh dear, my failings as a barber have been discovered," said Mr. Bigelow, looking sheepish. "Give me the scissors and I'll fix it," said Arabella. Anne watched more of her hair fall to the floor. How fitting, she thought, to have her mother cut her hair the same way she used to cut Joseph's. "Now I'll look even more like Joseph," she said. When she was done, Arabella stepped back. "Yes, sir," she said with satisfaction. "You'll blind the eyes of anyone looking for that fleeing girl of 15. "What fleeing girl of 15? Anne asked. "It's just the advertisements about you, Anne," said Catherine. "They've been running for months in the papers. Haven't you seen them?" "Advertisements about me? I'm the fleeing girl of 15? Anne's voice trembled. Mr. Bigelow reluctantly pulled a newspaper out of a pile on the floor. "I didn't think you particularly wanted to see them," he said apologetically. "But since you'll soon be on safe soil, you might as well read one." Anne jutted out her jaw as she held the paper and read, $500 reward. Ran away on Sunday night, the 23rd instant, before 12 o'clock, from the subscriber, residing in Rockville, Montgomery County, Maryland, my Negro girl, Anne Maria Weems, about 15 years of age, a bright mulatto, some small freckles on her face, slender person, thick suit of hair, inclined to be sandy. Her parents are free and reside in Washington, D.C. It is evident she was taken away by someone in a carriage, probably by a white man, by whom she may be carried beyond the limits of the state of Maryland. I will give the above reward for her apprehension and detention, so that I get her again. C.M. Price." Anne's thoughts swam with confusion. About 15 years of age? Had she miscounted? Had Richard lied? Could she have been wrong in figuring her age all this time? Her throat tightened, and she looked up into the worried eyes of her parents and sister. She decided to simply blurt it out. "But I thought I was 13. The group surrounding her all began talking at once. "That stupid Mr. Price doesn't know anything," said Catherine. "Whatever Master Richard told you about your birthday was right," said her mother. "He obviously didn't want it to look as if he'd mistreated a child enough for her to run, so he made you older to save his reputation," said Mr. Bigelow. And finally, her father gave her the best evidence yet. "Baby girl, you've been walking around here looking for all the world like a boy. Isn't that right?" "Yes, Papa," said Anne. "Well, you won't pass for a boy once you've turned 15, you mark my words." Anne looked from Catherine's shapely form filling out her pale green dress to her own flat chest under the black jacket. When she looked up again, Catherine was grinning at her. Arabella shifted in her chair. "Anne Maria, I never would have known how important a birthday could be to a child if it hadn't been for you. So John Jr. and this new one will always know, now that I've got the time to tend to more than just keeping hunger and sickness from our door." John Jr. sat at Anne's feet, playing with a spoon in a wooden bowl. Anne bent over and kissed the top of his head. His baby curls felt soft on her lips. "Thank you, Mama," she said. The light behind the curtains faded, and when it had been dark for some time, they all began to feel it. There was an uneasiness, then long breaks in the conversation, and finally silence, except for the sound of the clock ticking toward 9. Anne felt it first as a tightness in her throat, then when her father rubbed his forehead with one trembling hand and said softly, "Those Curfew bells will be ringing soon. She felt as if her whole body wanted to shout, no. Her mother stood and held out her arms to Anne, but Anne refused to go to her. Don't make me go, she said, clutching her chair. She turned to Mr. Bigelow. Please don't make me go, she begged. Mr. Bigelow's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of her sadness rested on him. Let me stay here. I'll live as a boy. No one will ever know. Her words tumbled over each other. Joseph and Addison and Augustus will be home soon. They can protect me. Master Charles will give up searching for me. He won't hunt me forever. Then I can live with you. She looked searchingly at her parents. You can tell everyone I'm a nephew. Please, let me stay here. She didn't even try not to cry. Her shoulders shook and she hung her head, letting tears drip onto her lap. She felt her mother's arms wrap around her shoulders, holding tightly and rocking. Shh, Arabella whispered. Please let me stay here. Let me stay here. Anne chanted it to the rhythm of the rocking, wanting the words to make it come true. Suddenly she felt her mother push away. She was startled by the fury she saw on Arabella's face. That bastard Price, Arabella cried. Who is he to rip this child away from us? She swayed, and John caught her under the elbows to steady her. His face twitched with anguish. You're going to a new world, baby girl, he said softly. Anne could feel the time slipping away. When she told Mr. Bigelow yes to freedom, she had set in motion a wheel that could not stop turning until she arrived in that new world. Will you, she swallowed, trying to form the words around the tears. Will you come visit me? Her father pulled her from her chair and clasped her so tightly it hurt. I will save every penny, and in a few years, if it's not enough for train fare to Canada, I'll jump a freight car to come see you, he vowed. Me too, said Catherine, and she wound her thin arms into the hug so that she could hold Anne as well. Anne closed her eyes and breathed in the mingling smells of her father's wool waistcoat and the rosemary oil in Catherine's hair. Learn enough in school for both of us, all right? She said to Catherine. Catherine tipped her head back to gaze at Anne. I will, she said solemnly. When Anne embraced her mother, they stood silent for a moment. Then Anne whispered, Will you visit me too, Mama? Arabella nodded into the nape of Anne's neck. Give these babies some time to grow up. Then we'll all jump that freight car. Anne sighed, knowing it was only a dream that they would ever be able to come, but remembering that Uncle William's dreams had come true. She gave her mother a squeeze and felt a tiny shove from her mother's belly. She jumped back. I think she's telling me goodbye, she said. I believe she is, said Arabella. John Jr. tugged at Anne's skirt, begging to be picked up, and she gave him a goodbye kiss. You grow up healthy, you hear? She said to him. He patted her nose. We'll write to you and tell you everything, when you get a new sister or brother, and when your brothers come home, said her mother. You be good, and take our love to Uncle William and Aunt Mimi, her father said. The curfew bell rang. Anne's parents, sister and brother, hurried to take their leave. As the bell clanged in the crisp night air, Anne felt that it announced the end of her time as a daughter and a sister within this circle of her family. The next day, the sun rose cold and clear. Anne washed and dressed in her coach boy's clothes. She took a last look around the sitting room, which had been her bedroom since she became Joe Wright. She rolled up her straw mat and folded her quilt. Mr. Bigelow peeked in on her. Ready? He asked. Anne straightened her cap. Thank you. she began, but then felt there were no words to express how grateful she was. Mr. Bigelow held out both his hands to her, his head cocked in a way that showed he understood. Anne reached past the hands and went right to a hug around his middle. He pressed Anne's head against his chest briefly, then held her away to look at her. "Whom will I discuss Robinson Crusoe with when you're gone?" he asked sadly. "Maybe you should get married and have that son you were saving the book for," Anne said. Mr. Bigelow chuckled, but said he would consider her suggestion. "And now let's be off," he said. "Dr. H. will be waiting for us." Mr. Bigelow rode inside the carriage. Anne drove expertly down the wide dirt streets of the city and turned onto the cobblestones of Pennsylvania Avenue. She found herself immediately in the path of a huge omnibus with passengers hanging off the sides and a full team of horses huffing as they pulled the heavy thing up the avenue. A month ago, she might have panicked and let go of the reins, but today she turned right, avoided another carriage and a man on a horse, and continued to her destination, the White House. There, waiting right in front of the black iron fence, was a tall, slender man with a pointed nose and sandy brown hair. And now playing the part of a servant was introduced. While Mr. Bigelow and Dr. H. chatted and exchanged comments about the weather, she climbed down Mr. Bigelow's carriage and mounted Dr. H.'s carriage. Dr. H.'s black horse twisted his head around to get a good look at his new driver. Anne held the reins, ready to go. Inside her leather gloves, her hands turned clammy with sweat, but she kept her face expressionless and calm. "I'm just right," she told herself, "and no one is chasing me." When Dr. H. had climbed back into his carriage and it was time to go, Anne wanted to see Mr. Bigelow one last time. He lifted his chin, as if to tell her to be strong, and gave her a lingering look, his eyes soft with fatherly affection. Anne pressed her lips together to keep from smiling too deeply. She didn't dare wave or call goodbye, but after she'd slapped the reins against the horse's back, she briefly swept one hand in an arc that appeared to passers-by as if she were shooing away flies, but to Mr. Bigelow was meant as farewell.
This is the little doggy that's making a lot of noise. Gigi, come here. Say hi to the 7th grade. You were not very good. Come here, come here, come here, come here. Say hello.